All right, so I hear that the Rams are rebuilding. They don't have a lot of talent. They have no picks. I mean, that's what Craig Carton of the Carton Show said on FS1. That is what Mike Florio has suggested, but it could not be further from the truth. And I'm going to get to the big five here to show you basically if any team in the league had these five players, they'd be able to build around them. Maybe not any team. There are a lot of really bad organizations out there, but any competent team, if you will, would take this and not look at it as a rebuild opportunity. When you have Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, Jalen Ramsey, Bobby Wagner, and Matthew Stafford, you're not rebuilding. Okay, you might be reloading, but that's not rebuilding. You're not blowing anything up. There's no need to blow anything up. So when you look at Aaron Donald, who is a Pro Bowler for the 9th straight season, he is the first ever player voted All-Pro. He tied 4th in pressures for interior defensive linemen through week 11. You look at Cooper Kupp, another guy who got hurt in the season. 5th in receiving yards when he gets hurt, 2nd in receptions through week 10, number 5 PFF wise, number 4 PFF receiving, number 1 in PFF drop rate, number 1 in PFF blocking through week 10. He has 3,200 yards since week 1 of last year. He missed 7 games. He leads in every category for the wide receivers except for yards and yards per reception for the last 32 games that he's played. That means he's ahead in almost every category of guys like Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, you name it, he's ahead of them. 3,200 yards is insane. He has more yards in the last 32 games, than Justin Jefferson has in the last 34. He has more production anyway. So that is something to keep in mind. Then you have Matthew Stafford, who is 7th in completion percentage, near the bottom of the league in time to throw through week 11. Why do I bring up time to throw, you may ask? Well, it's because he literally had no time to throw. He had an offensive line that had a new left tackle, new center, new right guard, whatever, except for right tackle, who was Rob Havenstein was there the entire season. But pretty much he had a new offensive line, movement, whether that be, adding a guy like Jeremiah Colon, Police Academy guy, Ty Nsekhe. I think that came after Stafford. But the point being is that he never had a consistent offensive line this year. So he never had the time to throw and was still 7th in completion percentage. Was it the best year? No. But I think he was really coming on strong after the concussion. We look at the Saints game. They have the 2 touchdowns out of Stafford. He throws a bomb to Tutu Atwell. They're winning. And then he gets hurt and they lose the game. And really, they're not the same team after he gets hurt. That was a big, big loss for the Rams. Make no mistake about it. Then you look at Bobby Wagner. Okay. And the next two I'm going to talk about, Bobby Wagner and Jalen Ramsey, are very important here because they are one of a select few guys. You're talking about Tyler Higbee and Rob Havenstein at that point that played all 17 games. Okay. That is ridiculous. The fact that this team went 5-12 and these veterans didn't play the veteran card or fake an injury and sit out the last remaining games. No, they played every single game. So Bobby Wagner just got signed by the Rams. The whole offseason, there's, football TikTokers, or I should have stopped right there, but football TikTokers are basically saying that this guy's washed, right? And now all of a sudden people on Twitter are saying he's washed. And now there's actually people in the NFL media circuit that are like, he's lost a step. No, he hasn't. No, he absolutely has not. Bobby Wagner did the exact opposite. He was tied for 5th in pressures and sacks for the position, the lowest missed tackle percentage in the NFL. He only allowed 1 touchdown in coverage, tied for 4th in interceptions, only 1 penalty, 1 PFF, first in PFF grade for linebackers, 1st in run defense for PFF, 1st in tackling for PFF, 6th in pass rush for PFF, and 9th in coverage for PFF as a linebacker. He was also rated the PFF 2022 All-Pro. He was fantastic. He gave the Rams something they have not had in a very long time. I'm not talking about very good linebacker play like we've seen from Ernest Jones in passing. We've seen from Corey Littleton. We've seen from James Laurinaitis. I mean, we have not seen this level of play maybe ever. Maybe since London Fletcher. Maybe even past that. Bobby Wagner had the best season for a Rams linebacker that we've seen in a long time. And so the idea that now he no longer exists and you're going to say there's no talent, there's nothing to build around, they don't have a core group of guys. Well, I just told you based on what I showed you, and I only talked about the facts for this season, okay? I only talked about this season, but Bobby Wagner's numbers speak for itself. And keep in mind, he's playing on a defense that's exhausted. The offense, it's 3-and-out mania. It's 16 to 18 points a game, okay? It's not a good offense. The defense is constantly on the field. They play bend, don't break, so he's on the field even longer and still has those numbers. It's incredible, and he does not get enough credit. Another guy that doesn't get enough credit and is constantly labeled as a guy that was cooked, he's washed. I love that. We just use washed for everything now. Is Jalen Ramsey. I mean, look at tied for 4th in pressure / sacks for a cornerback. He's first in batted passes. He's tied for 7th in stops, tied for 5th in interceptions and pass breakups. He's 3rd according to PFF in all corners. He's 1st in run defense for corner. He's tied for 2nd in pass rush at corner, and he's tied for 9th in PFF coverage grade for cornerback. PFF 2022 All Pro. Now, I will say this. PFF is not the Bible. It's not everything. They are subjective grades. Just because a guy is rated heavily on PFF doesn't mean he is the greatest thing since sliced bread. You know, there are some things there. I mean, Taylor Rapp, I think, is rated the 12th safety, and you could argue Taylor Rapp at times looked like the weak link of the secondary. Not a knock on him, but I think he's rated a lot higher on PFF than I would rate him, and probably you would. So the point being here is that PFF is to be taken with a grain of salt. But also, Jalen Ramsey had a good year. We could talk about him giving up 7 touchdowns, but did he really give up 7 touchdowns? Hard to tell. Really hard to tell. We don't know what the coverage is. We don't know what his assignment was, but what we do know is that he had a career high in tackles this season. We do know that he continued to play lights out, continued to ball out, play all 17 games at a position where, let's be honest here, at any point he could have said, I tweaked a hammy or whatever. But no, instead, this guy is getting shoulder surgery again. That tells me that he could have been playing with an injury, probably was playing with an injury, and he's just that much of a competitor where, despite the fact this team wasn't playing for anything, he didn't sit out. I'm not accusing anybody of doing it, but the guys that certainly didn't do it, I'm going to give them, props for. So again, if you think this team is in trouble, if you think this team doesn't have any talent, doesn't have anybody to build around, doesn't have a core group of players, then you, my friend, don't watch the Los Angeles Rams and your opinion is invalid. Because I'm sorry, it's not me versus you. It's not even the fan base versus you. It's just the reality of the situation. Okay, Aaron Donald, if he comes back, because you could argue if he retires, okay, then it's a 4, but it's still core 4. I mean, it's a good group of players. Aaron Donald is still the best pass rusher in all of football if he comes back. Then you have Cooper Kupp, who is still the best wide receiver in football when he comes back and he's healthy. You have Matthew Stafford, who 1 year with decency around him. We're talking an offensive line that was somewhat consistent, still the 24th ranked rushing attack. So maybe this year with Cam Akers starting to turn a corner here, 3 straight 100-yard games to end the season, showing some serious burst and, starting to get back to where he was. Maybe this year he has a run game. Can you imagine what he does with that? Jared Goff had a top 10 run game in 2020, his last year, and the Rams did not get to the NFC title. They also had the number 1 defense. Okay, Matthew Stafford hasn't had a number 1 defense. He hasn't had a top 10 run game. And he still has won a Super Bowl with this team. He won a Super Bowl with them on the defense being depleted, starting a guy that they took 2 years out of retirement. He won a Super Bowl with a 7th-round pick that was originally a special teams ace that had to fill in there. He still won a Super Bowl with the fact that his 2 starting tight ends were out. I mean, Kendall Bland was supposed to start, but he got hurt on the second play of the game. He still won a Super Bowl with the fact that his running back came literally right off a torn Achilles tendon. Another guy in Darrell Henderson, you had Cam Akers, you had Darrell Henderson with the high ankle sprain. Okay. And then he lost Odell Beckham Jr., who was honestly the hottest guy in that game. You talk about a guy that just got off to a really hot start, caught a touchdown, looked like he was going to just roast the Bengals alive. He gets hurt. And so now all of a sudden you're throwing to Ben Skoranek, who's a rookie 7th rounder in that moment. You're throwing to Van Jefferson, who we find out wasn't healthy for the last half of the season. He was playing injured. You're throwing to Bryson Hopkins, who literally caught more passes in that Super Bowl game than he had almost the entire year this year. I mean, he does not get enough credit, okay? And when you look at Stafford, you see top 5 material. He can be a top 5 quarterback next year as long as the medicals check out, which I think they will. That's a top 5 quarterback, the number 1 wide receiver, the number 1 corner, the number 1 pass rusher, and arguably the number 1 linebacker in football. And so you are going to tell me that Sean McVay should leave. Sean McVay's understood for leaving because this is going to be a rebuild. How are they rebuilding? How would they be rebuilding this? You reload. You have guys. Don't act like you don't. Sure, you have to bring guys back. Not everybody is signed. You look at Greg Gaines, right? You look at Ashawn Robinson. You have to pay them. You have to pay David Edwards. And you could say what you will on the offensive line. Like, okay, Noteboom's coming off a torn Achilles, right? You look at Brian Allen. Can he stay healthy? That's an issue. Coleman Shelton. Those 3 guys are signed, though. Okay, you drafted Logan Bruss in the 3rd round. You got, significant contribution towards the end of the season out of your 4th round corner, Jacoby Durant, right? So your receiver room looks pretty good because you got Kupp, you got 2nd rounder Atwell, you got 2nd rounder Van, you got 7th rounder Skoranek starting to, come on there. Tyler Higbee still under another year of his deal. Bryson Hopkins started to show out towards the end of the season. The offensive line, at the very least, has depth, because now these guys can play and you can bring them back. Alaric Jackson's exciting at left tackle if you play him there, right? Ty Nsekhe, bring him back as a cheap backup. You have Kyron Williams, you traded up to get in the 5th round. Cam Akers is balling. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Ernest Jones is playing well on top of Bobby Wagner. So you got Jacoby Durant with Jalen Ramsey. Troy Hill and David Long, they'll be free agents. It gives them an opportunity to maybe reevaluate if they want to continue going with Robert Rochelle and, maybe give him a shot, Darion Kendrick, or draft. And they could definitely draft players. What about their pass rush? You could argue with the way that Leonard Floyd played at the end of the season that Leonard Floyd should be considered a core piece because Leonard Floyd balled out. And yes, they still have Allen Robinson, who they paid money for. Do they keep Allen Robinson? There are a lot of different things they can do. There are also a lot of different things they can do to free up money. We're talking up to $80 million they could free up this offseason if they wanted to. I'm not saying that's what they'll do, but there's plenty of opportunities to reload instead of blowing up and rebuilding. And that is the misconception. And then to address the final thing, the whole they don't have picks, that's a load of crap, okay? This year is the last year that they don't have all their picks. Next year, they have all their picks. Okay, 2024, they have their 1st rounder again. It's not like they don't have all their picks. When they wouldn't have all their picks is if they went back to trading everything again. If they made that trade for Christian McCaffrey, they wouldn't have all their picks. If they made that trade for Brian Burns, much as I would have liked it, they wouldn't have all their picks. And if they make that stupid trade for Sean Payton, they won't have all their picks. So here's what I'll say, okay? I don't know who the head coach is going to be. I lean towards McVay. If it's not him, I think they're going to go with Raheem Morris. If it's not those two, then it better not be Sean Payton because you do not trade picks away now after complaining that they don't have picks. You do not trade picks away and to get a head coach, okay? You just don't do it. So the big 5 here, they're real. Again, if you missed me, if I stuttered, you got a top 5 quarterback. You got the number 1 wide receiver, number 1 pass rusher, number 1 corner, and potentially number 1 linebacker. Are they the youngest of the group? No. But they're not all 38 years old like some would have you to believe. Andrew Whitworth isn't on the roster anymore. He was 40. I don't know where we're getting that this is an older team. They're not older. They were like the 6th youngest team this year. It's a bunch of misinformation and it's a bunch of laziness because people don't want to put in the work. If you're on the East Coast, and I mean, you're not like me or other Rams fans who watched every game. Yeah, if you're getting paid for your job is to literally talk about every team in the NFL, you're going to cut corners. You probably didn't watch every Rams game because they were on the West Coast. And I'll be honest with you, we don't get every game on the East Coast. Okay? But making up just flat out lies, like I said with Carton. Carton literally said the Rams are a train wreck. They'll be a train wreck for 3 to 5 years. They don't have picks, all of that. He's wrong. Like you're just wrong. It's not even opinion. It's not even, subjective. You're just wrong. The Rams will have picks next year. And the Rams have enough picks this year. And by the way, they didn't have a second rounder last year. So I'm excited about that opportunity. I'm a little annoyed that they don't have a fourth rounder because, again, they fell for the Bill Belichick. I'm going to release this running back, so let's offer, a sixth and a fourth for Sony Michel. Hated that. Not Sony Michel, but offering a fourth later on just was ridiculous. And you'll see when the draft comes, you'll be like, wow, I wish we were picking in the fourth round. Look, they have a second round pick. They have a third round pick. Those 2 rounds are the most likely. Obviously, first round is the most likely, but those 2 rounds are very likely to find a starting caliber player. When you look at the Rams and what they need, it's not quarterback. Excuse me. Running back, you could argue later on in the draft. You don't need that. Wide receiver, it really depends, right? I mean, I think they're pretty good, even if they decide to roll with Allen Robinson. But if they move on from him, they could go after Cooks. They could go after a potentially, cap casualty in Robert Woods. With tight ends, maybe add another guy with Higbee and Hopkins. Offensive line, you could add some guys to compete, but I do like what they have. And if they were fully healthy and they were able to gel and have that continuity, you would like it too. The defensive line, you bring back one, if not both, of Greg Gaines and Ashawn Robinson. But if not, love the way Bobby Brown played down the stretch. I love Aaron Donald. And obviously, if he comes back, that's obvious, right? You have Marquise Copeland, who's a exclusive rights free agent. He'll be back. Got Jonah Williams. Those are good players that they've developed, right? Then outside linebacker. The Mike Hoyt experiment. He's 3'11 now. He looked pretty darn good at outside linebacker. Just wait until he's able to drop to 275, 280. And that's what they're going to plan on. At least that's the plan right now. You got Leonard Floyd, like I mentioned. If they move on from him, who knows? Daniel Hardy. I didn't even mention Laurel Murchison in the trenches. So I pinpoint edge as an opportunity to upgrade, of course. Then you look at the linebackers. You're good at linebacker. Roseboom, Jake Hummel, Gervais, those guys backing up, Bobby Wagner and Ernest Jones. When you don't really play 2 linebackers all that much, it's not that much of a need. You want Bobby on the field at all times, but you don't need like another guy. Then they're good there. I mean, Traven Howard, I don't know if he'll be back, all of that, whatever. Corner, that's where you look. So I think their biggest needs are edge, corner. Maybe you look at offensive line because obviously they were a huge need this year. But the injuries were ridiculous. They didn't get a chance to really see what they were made of. And then you grab safety. So if we're really being honest, if you look at the needs of the Rams, it's not everything, okay? They're not a train wreck, and they're going to have a third-place schedule next year, okay? Add some edge help. Figure out what you're doing at wide receiver with Allen Robinson. Figure out what you're doing with big-ticket items. Figure out what you're doing with Allen Robinson, with Leonard Floyd, with any of those guys. If you don't want to pay them long-term, they're too much money, move on, trade them, whatever. But you have to figure that out. But now, because you had a season like this, you can target the back end of the secondary. Like I always say to people, they won the Super Bowl. You're not going to see Taylor Rapp gone. You're not going to see Nick Scott gone. They're not going to get rid of Jordan Fuller. But a 5-12 season, they might start to be like, we need to upgrade here. And they did that. They did that even after the Super Bowl. They were like, we really like Ernest Jones. Let's go out and get Bobby Wagner. And that's the best linebacker they've had in years. I don't know who's better than Bobby Wagner that they've gotten as far as talent-wise at linebacker. That was a nuts signing. And that's something not really common with them. They don't spend a lot of money on linebackers or safeties. But they already did it with Wagner. Who's to say they won't go out and get a great safety to help out Jalen Ramsey over the top? Because just think, if he had a little bit more help and wasn't just Taylor Rapp, think about how good Ramsey would be then. But that's my thoughts. The reason why I brought the Big Five up, even regardless, is because I wanted to highlight that their seasons weren't a failure, okay? Obviously, the end result was the 5-12 season, but they weren't bad individually. They're still great. They're still going to be great, and they still have plenty left in the tank. And the Rams have core pieces. I'm not asking if you like Jalen Ramsey or Bobby Wagner or Matthew Stafford or Cooper Kupp or, any of them. But the stats show that they're still top of their class. So we got to act like that's the case. You could argue the Rams are the only team in the league where they have 5 different positions, or at least 4 different positions. Not Stafford, that would be a little ridiculous, but at least 4 positions where they have the best player at all 4. Not many teams can say that. I don't think any team can say that. So keep that in mind. Before you count this team out, before you say they need Sean Payton to get this talent out of them, no, that is a stupid, regurgitated narrative I keep seeing. They don't need Sean Payton. They don't need Sean Payton because they have talent. Think about this. Before I sign off here, think about this. Think about how many coaches are chomping at the bit to go to a team that was just in the Super Bowl and won said Super Bowl, a team that has been to 2 Super Bowls in the last 4 years, one of only 3, including the Chiefs and the Patriots, a team that was coached by Sean McVay, that the talent acquisition was also overseen by guys like Sean McVay and Les Snead, getting to work with Les Snead, who has the desire, the ability, and is not scared to make a trade, having unlimited funding with Stan Kroenke, right? You know, think about being in LA, having a brand new stadium. The potential to play savior, to be in that role, coaches aren't stupid. They're going to look at this position and they're going to be like, if this became available, this is the number 1 position in football, because people will see they have way too much talent to be this again. I could do an okay job and we're going back to the playoffs, and I'm all of a sudden savior. And all of a sudden I'm the one getting the endorsement deals. I'm now the Campbell's Chunky guy. I'm now the Papa John's guy, or whatever the hell, pizza, Little Caesars. That's what coaches are thinking. This is a golden opportunity to have this much talent. It's literally the opposite of what guys like Carton and Florio were saying. So take that for what you will, but those are my thoughts on the Big 5 and why the mainstream media narrative that they don't have a core group of guys and that everyone's on their way out is just complete horse, if you know what I mean. That's all I got, folks. Take care. Later.